Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Insights with Ben Chodor. We try to do one of these a month. We're actually going to shoot two of them this month. We missed a month. Life just got really, really busy. But I'm really excited that we're coming back from our little mini hiatus with this one. All right. And before I give it away who it is, I've had the privilege of interviewing her before. I've read her books before. Her newest book, Own the Room, is now, well, and look, it's yellow, so I can't see that good. Own the Room is now my favorite of all of Amy Gensu's books. I'm excited to bring her on. Why don't we bring Amy on? Amy, I
Ben,
know for
hello.
you, all your books are like your children, right? You can't have a favorite, but this, the timing of this book, how you wrote it, your co-author with you. I love all the stories in it. It's just, it's brilliant.
Oh, Ben, thank you so much. It is like your children. There's different reasons why you love each of them differently. This one is near and dear to my heart. I co-authored this one with my business partner, co-founder of Paravis Partners, longstanding friend. We actually met each other, way back when in business school back in 1997. Who
Wow.
knew we would end up being business partners and book authors together? And I think owning the room is like a timeless topic that, as we think about our presence and influence in the world, that's part of the game and a good topic to always be thinking about.
All right, I'm going to ask you a couple questions that really have nothing to do with the book first. But the first one is, as someone who's written books by themselves, what was it like having a co-author? Was it difficult? Was it easier? Did you find like it was like what was it like?
Yeah, writing with somebody else is different. It definitely, in a world of collaboration, I think all the positives are that you definitely like two minds are always better than one, sort of collective wisdom. You approach the topic differently, different lenses. So I think this book benefits from, two minds, two voices, two people thinking together and collaborating. And with collaboration, it comes with all the things where like, wow, I'm accountable to another person for deadlines. Wow, we actually need to talk about what our process is and how are we going to communicate and how are we going to work together and how do we bring two different voices and perspectives into one consistent vision and execution.
No, I think it works. I mean, I've only written one book, and I had a co-writer with me, and it was great to be able to bounce things off Gab and back and forth. And
Yes.
it just made it easier. When I was in a lull, she picked up the slack, and vice versa.
Yes.
And because there's someone else counting on you, you're not missing your deliverables, and it
Right.
kind
There's less
of works out.
procrastination for sure when you have a co-author than when it's just you by yourself.
Absolutely. All right. So here's a question that has two questions that have nothing to do with anything with the book. What was your first job you ever had?
Wow, my first job professionally was actually at Taco Bell Corp in strategic planning. But way, way back, if we go even
That's
further
where I
back,
want to go. Like your
no,
first
okay. I'm trying to think
making
what was my first
$4 an
job?
hour or whatever.
Yeah, so it was between, I can't remember time frame. At some point in junior high, high school, I shelved books at the public library.
Wow.
And at another point, probably early high school, I worked at a surf shop, like surf, t-shirt, skateboard
Wow.
shop, doing retail as sort of a sales lady. And Tony Hawk was all the rage. And my
Right.
one memory from that is Tony Hawk actually came to the store and signed skateboards. And it was sort of like this big, wonderful moment for all of us who worked at the store.
So you know what's amazing, but there's a lot of foreshadowing there. You worked in a library and then you wrote a book. And when you worked in a surf shop, you learned that one day you're going to sign books, right? I'm just kind of putting the two together. All right. So here's my other non about anything question. I became friends with someone who I interviewed named David Adler. He started a company called BizBash, and he's really into these Jeffersonian dinners. And he always asks, like, at Jeffersonian dinner, before you get into the meat of it, you just ask some questions just to break the ice.
Yeah,
And he says his favorite question to ask is, "Who was your favorite teacher?"
who's
Not
my
before
favorite?
you got to like college or anything. Like, who is your?
Yeah.
Is there a teacher that you remember that somehow helped guide you through?
Yeah, I definitely remember I had this high school English teacher named Mrs. Starnes, and I had her both junior and senior year. And I remember her because She was probably the toughest teacher I've ever had.
Right.
She was not shy about giving you direct feedback. And, she pushed our group of kids, to really push us to the limit of what our critical thinking could be. She was the first teacher that took us to Broadway to see what a Broadway
Wow.
show was all about. She had us read some of the great,
I love that.
books of our time. So when I think of like critical thinking and the
Yep.
judgment and so many things that I have to do today, they really stem from
I
her.
I love that. Yeah. For me, it's two teachers. I had a second grade teacher who just made me feel special, and I just remember it.
Mhm.
You don't remember that much when you're young, but when I think about her name, Mrs. Emanuel, when I think about her,
Wow.
she believed in me when no one else did. But I had a seventh grade homeroom teacher named Mr. McGuire. He put us all. We were all in the room. Turned the lights
Hmm.
off in the room, and he played Pink Floyd's "Dark Side of the Moon," the
Wow.
album. And then, as soon as the side was over, he made us write what we were thinking about. And it was the first time in my entire life
Wow.
that I wrote creatively, as opposed to a book report on this person or a history project. And it just sort of opened your mind that there's more than just, well, what's in a book. So
Yeah. Oh, I
that
love
was
that. I love that.
all right.
And
So
how
I'm going
fun
to
to
ask
like
you.
think back memory
Yeah.
lane. So thank you
Oh
for those
yeah. It's
questions. Yeah.
oh, and then you think, because now the other thing is, like, when you were thinking about that teacher, you knew what you felt like when you're in high school. You felt like
Yes.
you were there. And when I talk about my second grade teacher, for a moment, I'm still like a 7, 8 year old boy. I mean, you still think about it. All right. So I have so many questions to ask you about the book, but let me
Sure.
ask you just about the book, but not about the book. Because I know, when did you start writing it? Like, when did you and your
So in
partner start writing it?
Yeah, interestingly, Own the Room came before The Leader You Want to Be.
Yep.
So Own the Room came out in 2013.
Yep.
But believe it or not, the ideas in it really began at the inception of the firm back in 2004.
Okay.
So from 2004 through about 2010, we were really out in the classroom with leaders, lots of different leadership development programs, training programs, out in the field talking to leaders about this amorphous topic called presence and owning the room. And then around 2010, 2011, we got the great opportunity to partner with Harvard Business Review, who was interested in the content. It took about 2 years to write, and then it came out in 2013.
All right. So the question I'm going to ask is, you wrote this in 2013. There was no such thing as COVID. There was not this internet blast, this virtual world that we live in. Can you own the room virtually? Does the learnings in this also work theoretically in this environment?
I hope they do. I mean, I think you're pointing out such a great thing, Ben. Now, the virtual room. How do we own the virtual room?
Yep.
And I think a lot of the principles still apply, right? As you head into a virtual room meeting, what was your preparation and mindset going in? There's a lot about our mindset and the way we prepare. I think the body piece, in terms of our expression and energy, is really important. I think there still needs to be a sense of connection,
Yep.
a sense of space translation, lots of things I think people take for granted now that we're virtual, and actually, in some ways, might be more heightened as I think about it than when we're actually in a room gathered together physically.
Oh, I think when you're in the physical room, there's elements that you can almost fake or someone misses, because
Yes.
my eyes, when we're doing this, I'm only focusing on what's on the screen. When you're in
Right.
the room, there's a second you're looking to the right, the left, you hear no, there's lots of things going on. And when you're doing it virtually, if your body language isn't good,
Right.
it stands out like a sore thumb, right? Like a
Right.
minute, 10 seconds feels like an hour. And in a physical room, it's sort of like when you have that trip moment. If you actually are walking, you trip and you fake it off, you can actually fake
Right.
it off. A virtual, you can't. So, starting off with, how important is presence in leadership?
I think presence is really important. You said something earlier that in the questions you were asking about our previous teachers, that in
Right.
that moment you can even remember how you were left feeling. And so presence is this squishy word, but I often say, hey, when you head into that meeting, if nothing else, think about what's the felt experience you want to leave everybody
Right.
coming out of that meeting. And that's about the quality of your presence.
I love that. All right. So one of my favorite concepts in the book is signature voices, right? and
Mm.
how this can help you develop as a leader. Like, first, what is a signature voice, and how do you find your voice?
Yeah, signature voice. We picked the word signature because, like a signature, Ben, yours is different than mine,
Yep.
right? And they shouldn't be the same. They should be unique. They should be authentic. It should be uniquely yours. And yet, a signature makes its mark. So, like a leader, our hope was that as folks found their signature voice or unleashed their signature voice or built it, that they were thinking about two dimensions. On the one hand, who am I authentically as a leader? What's my authentic leadership? What's my brand and hallmark going to be? And then what's the mark and impact that I hope to have on my organization or on my team? And if you put those things together, that's like having a signature voice.
And can you teach it?
I don't know that it can be taught, but I do think it can be guided. It can be so much of our work is helping people to discover, I think, in some ways, that which is already there. I think sometimes just in the world where things are so busy and we're moving from meeting to meeting to meeting, the opportunity to pause and have someone just ask you, Ben, what makes you you? If I
Right.
were to ask all your colleagues, what's Ben's hallmark or signature? And how are you left feeling when Ben leaves a room? It'd
Right.
be like amazing to hear back the collection of things from your team and your colleagues.
Right.
And
And
I think that can help galvanize.
what I hope it is
Yeah.
might not be what it is. I
Right.
hope it's they feel heard, right? I hope
Mhm.
they feel empowered, right? But I don't know if that's how they feel, right? And that's so it'd be really interesting to figure it out. So when you come up with like the approach of finding the right balance between passive, driving, and a supportive voice, how do you find the right balance?
I think instead of balance, I might reframe it to say, what's the situation and what
Right.
voice does the situation demand? So, in some cases, when we are the leader in a role and we are responsible for driving the ball, that might mean that we need to bring more of our clarity and direction and prescription and really lead the troops. And there's other times where it's actually more appropriate in the situation to sit and listen and observe. You might be
Right.
using all voices in any given meeting fluidly. And the watch out is when we over index on one form of a voice or one part of our voice for every situation or every audience.
All right. So how much of owning the room is also reading the room, right? Because I could go into a
Yes.
situation going, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. And then the
Yeah.
moment you walk into the room and you're looking around the room, how much of it is you have to, I don't want to know if it's called like thinking on your feet, but how much of it is you have to be able to pivot, or is it you don't have to pivot?
Oh, I think that, Ben, you're highlighting such an important thing here. I think my favorite term is prepare so that you can be on the fly.
Right.
You prepare as much as you possibly can. You have your headlines, your answer first, your deck ready. But the minute you walk in that room, presence becomes being present so that you
Right.
can pivot and trust that you've done enough preparation that it's all in your back pocket,
Right.
but you're not attached to it, some expectation of how it's going to exactly go. Because we all know you got 30 minutes on the agenda, and next thing you know, they've whittled you
Yep.
down to 12 minutes.
What's really I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I'm starting to travel again. And
Mm,
yesterday I was listening to a podcast on The Sopranos, right?
mm,
And really interesting. An advice that one of the directors gave one of the actors once is an actor has three things they have to do. You have to come knowing your lines
mm,
and coming on. Actually, it wasn't The Sopranos. It was this thing called Smartless, and Tom Hanks was on it with Justin Bateman. And Justin Bateman asked Tom what is anything he ever learned from a director, and he goes, "I learned this at a young age. One, come on time, come
mm.
prepared, and come with an idea in your back pocket." And what he meant by it was be there in time, know your lines, but if it doesn't feel right, you have to have another idea to be able to go in another direction that wasn't written on the paper. And that's exactly what you're saying. And it works
Yes.
in all mediums. So I want to jump to this. It's hard to toss out assumptions about ourselves and how we are perceived, right?
Mm,
Which goes back to what
mhm.
we were talking about, how I always think or hope they perceive me when I come into the room. How do you coach professionals into tackling this?
Yeah, assumptions are, again, our mindsets, the beliefs the millions of messages we've heard throughout our life. And I think part of leadership is making sure that it's almost like a funnel, that every year, every quarter, pick your chapter marker, that we
Right.
look at that funnel and we sort through what are the messages and assumptions that are actually outdated and no longer serve me? And which are the assumptions and mindsets and messages I've heard that, wow, really inform who I am as a leader and how I want to show up. And say, for example, for the first 18 years of my life, Ben, I grew up in a household with Chinese immigrant parents.
Right.
And I heard for 18 years of my life, be humble, don't speak unless spoken to. It's about the family, don't stand out. And then imagine I went to my first job, I think I mentioned earlier at Taco Bell.
Yep.
My
Yep.
manager's owned by PepsiCo. Speak up, Amy Sue. We need to hear from you more.
Right.
And then you inappropriately pick the wrong place to speak up. You don't feel like yourself. You get burned. So you go, you
Right.
know what? Forget it. I hope good work speaks for itself. And at some point, I had to sort through all of that mess and say, wait a minute. My parents telling me to be humble doesn't mean be deferential.
No.
That's like a faulty assumption, right? And my boss saying speak up doesn't mean don't hold any organizational awareness and just push back whenever you feel like it. And so I've had to sort through that. And now what I've come to is that my parents taught me a lot about old world hospitality and collaboration and teaming, which informs who I am as a leader, but doesn't mean don't speak.
No, I think that, I mean, when I hear it, I think they were saying, Amy, be kind, right?
Right. Yeah.
Humble is not, don't be mousy and not say anything. It is just being
Right.
like, be respectful and be kind, but you have to have ideas. When I interview, I'm the final interview for anyone who touches a customer
Mm.
or or other employees in the organization. So in the last year, we've hired like over, I guess, 300 plus people, and I've done like
Wow.
300 plus interviews in this section. And the last thing I say to everyone is the exact same thing. Don't just be a name on a spreadsheet. If you see something,
Mm.
say something. You have an idea, share it. The worst thing that's ever going to happen is that we're going to say, no, we're not going to do it for this reason, but thank you for the idea. But whoever wants to go through life just as a name on a spreadsheet
Right.
and not sharing and getting involved and speaking up. I mean, it's what makes us. I think it's what makes people special, right? So
Yes.
we're not drones.
100%. Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go here because there's a lot of questions I want to ask you, and I'm reading because I don't want to miss this one. I love the case studies. I loved all your case studies. In fact,
Thank you.
to me, I like any presentation I ever see. If someone doesn't open up a keynote or a talk and there's no stories involved, it almost loses me because
Mm.
when someone tells a story, I feel like I'm going on an adventure with them, and that no
Yes.
matter what the topic is, right? So um, you bring these professionals and their challenges to life. So can you share maybe one or two examples, or perhaps someone you coached since the book was published? Just some stories that can help people resonate to what it means to sort of own the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that, Ben. So much of our work is qualitative, and so
Mhm.
much of why I love this work is, to the word humble, the humility to get to partner and ride alongside some
Yep.
incredible people. So I would say a recent one, a client that I'm working with, interestingly, finally just got promoted, got to the executive ranks that she's been hoping for her whole career. And sometimes, actually, even at the senior levels, we reach this pinnacle, and suddenly what she said to me really stuck. Like, gosh, it feels like the clock just went back to zero.
Yep.
And here I am, kind of this seasoned professional. And now, my first time walking in to be in the C suite room and the board room, I feel like I'm at the start of my career again and feeling really ungrounded and insecure. And she described the impact to herself was, just starting to feel all that self-doubt and imposter syndrome, but at a different level in her career. But even worse, she said she felt like she was having trouble in the meeting room, owning the room, and instead like feeling that doubt and then not picking her spots. And so
Wow.
again, you realize this can happen at all ages and stages of
Hmm.
career, where the room changes, the collection of people change, our role changes, and now we've got to reimagine our voice and reinvent and reground.
But isn't that one of the best parts of the journey? Because if I look at my
Yes.
career, almost every time I've done something else, where I started a company, joined an organization, So you always walk into the room and something you, if you haven't done it every day for months or years, you walk in
Yeah.
always with a little self-doubt. And even though you know inside you can
Yes.
do it, and I think that's, it's like the butterflies, not to use
Yes.
another acting term. If you're not nervous before you get on stage, you're never going to be great. And I don't care if you're even on in professionals just
Yeah.
speaking, if you're going to do a keynote and you're not just a little nervous, you're not going to have that energy. So I
Yeah.
love that this is a journey and I should feel uncomfortable. But what you teach in the book is how to deal with those different portions or how do you own, because
Right.
again, each room is not exactly the same room.
Right. Yeah. And I love your point that even at the, championship level, right? I was reading that I think it's Bill Russell, sort of
Yeah.
NBA championship player who, and I think we cite this in the book where, he has a moment before every game where
Yep.
there's butterflies and nerves and he doesn't feel well, but that's actually part of his secret
Yep.
sauce.
Yep. Oh, if you're not on the edge, I am so much better when I am not just, yeah, just going through the motions. Because then
Yeah.
also, if you're just going through the motions, are you really present? And
Right.
that's the other thing that you teach in the, or you talk about in the book is like you have to be in that moment when
Yes.
you're engaging. All right. So one of the biggest aha moments in the book to me is the idea is that what gets you to the next level in your career isn't necessarily what you need to be successful at that moment. How do you go about resetting or revamping your signature voice as you transition to new roles?
Yeah. It's a lot of the story that I just mentioned that
Yep.
at the point of a new role, rather than, I think the marker is, hey, I'm not feeling comfortable. It's a
Right.
perfect time to say, wait a minute, let me now retake stock of where I am. How do I remember and celebrate who I am, how I got to this role, and then methodically plan for, okay, in this new role, what's the mandate? Who's the new set of stakeholders that I need to work with and influence? How do I come to know them? And so you're always riding, as we described in the book, both a deepening in your own voice and self while you're broadening the set of audiences and situations that you can handle or be effective in. So I think a role change is the perfect time to say, uh-oh, what new set of audiences here? What new set of situations? And, let me work my way through them.
Great answer. All right. So I love also that you actually say this in the book. Presence requires alignment of your mind, your body, and your words.
Mm,
Basically, walk to walk, walk to talk, right?
yeah.
But how how can I know if my mind and my words might be aligned, but how do I get my body in there too? And why is your body so important in this? And if my words and my mind are in line, but my body isn't, I don't think I'll be as effective, right?
Yeah, it's so fascinating, Ben. When you look at the research, something like, depending on what you read, between 70 and like 95% of our impact is actually nonverbal. So even if we're saying certain words, but our body is not in alignment, our audience, I think there's times when we go, wow, that seemed disingenuous, or the person says they're not nervous, but I see their palms sweating, I see their face getting flustered. Or even if we say, I'm really excited about this new recommendation. So if you have conviction, but you haven't dial clicked up your own emotion
Right.
and passion, you're going to leave the audience wondering, well, which is it, your words or your body?
Yeah, and I actually think if you can show the passion,
Yeah.
both physically and with your words, it's it's like a drug. It engages
Yes.
people because they're looking at you going like, "Whoa!" Some people don't understand just the words, like you said. If I say it in a monotone way, but if I get excited and I move, and I think also what you mean is, I happen to be one of these speakers who, when I get excited, my eyes light up and I use my hands a lot. But
Yes.
doesn't mean when you're saying your body doesn't mean you don't have to be like all hands and gesturing.
Right.
It is just how you, it's your, a lot of it is subtle. It's like your posture.
Yes. Yeah, it's really subtle. I always tell people, think of it like a radio dial. We
Yep.
all have a natural place where we sit on sort of our ability to emote or what feels natural. And you have to kind of read the situation. If it's a serious, more serious tone, formal presentation, you might place yourself on that dial a little differently than in all hands where you're, sharing the North Star and rallying the troops
Right.
and sharing why we're all moving in the same direction. Then you want to be able to like dial that dial up still within an authentic band, but knowing where you start in the world of composure to emotion and where that dial sits and how you dial click up and down is really important.
Which of the elements is the hardest for you to teach or change in someone? Is it the mental? Is it how they talk? Is it their body movements? Or it might be even something else?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, in the book we cover mind, heart, body, as you mentioned. And, when you put mind and body together, that emotion piece, I think
Hmm.
there's a lot you can do to build skill, the different repertoires of advocacy, framing, storytelling. I think most of us cognitively know what to do, but when nerves get in the way, emotions, you're having a difficult conversation, you've played it out, you know how you want to negotiate, and somehow the other person says something and it creates that emotional charge. I think that's where helping people say, how do you reground yourself in that moment,
Right.
catch your breath? To your
Right.
point, read the room, pivot.
Right.
That
You
becomes a
got to
lot
pick it.
harder. Yeah.
So, how do you practice? So, I mean, obviously, speaking in front of a group or talking to different teams is the best practice, but everyone doesn't always have that, luxury to do that. What's your advice? How do I practice? How do I find my voice? How do I find who I am? Are there any exercises that you can give the audience?
Yeah. I always say before a meeting, number one, even if you only have 10 minutes, take a
Yep.
look at the agenda and ask yourself three questions. What do I think? What do I believe? What questions might I have? And that way, when you do need to be fast on your feet, you're not using the audience's time to pause, go
Right.
into your mind, pull out the filing cabinet. So, on just the practical preparation point, even a few minutes of jotting a couple bullet points to
Right.
yourself goes a long way. Then, on the
Right.
nerves front, go ahead.
No, no, you go,
Yeah.
go.
I think on the nerves front, whatever that breathing, grounding ritual is, I had one professional share with me that she had read all about power poses. And so before meetings, she was actually heading into the restroom in a stall doing her
Right.
Wonder Woman power pose. And I said, well, do you think it works? And she said, I don't know if it was a placebo or if it worked, but I think it stopped my mind from worrying and I could smile and have fun.
I didn't think about that because part of it is because every time you speak in front of a group, all you do is think about their eyes on you, but you
Right.
don't always think about, okay, what are the things that I do that make me feel good or
Yeah.
comfortable in the situation. And so for her, it's
Right.
doing the Wonder Woman position, sets her
Right.
mind going, okay, deliver. I like that. So with that said, are you a big believer of rehearse, 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 rehearse? Or is there some element to just know your information and have an element of spontaneity? Or should every single second of the presentation be, you know, outside of reading the room and knowing you have to change it, but if it in the
Yeah.
perfect world, should your rehearsal be exactly like the live?
I personally am not a fan of like memorizing. I think when we try to memorize a script,
Yep.
our mind gets so locked into trying to remember that word. And so I often advise clients, you know, again, bullet points, and you're more feeling for the flow of your ideas.
Yep.
What's the order? What are some of the messages you want to hit? But then when you're actually in the room, have that come out as naturally as possible.
Right.
So there is an element of practicing and working your way through that, but then ripping up that script and not being attached to I have to say it exactly with those
Yep.
words is really important.
It's interesting. It took me a while in my career to learn. I am not the best script reader, right? So if I had to go up there and, whether it's pitch my company or sell you and go from A to Z, I mean, I'll get through it and I'll probably do an okay job, but I am much better. And I doubt myself a lot because you stick with a script because sometimes you think, I don't know the material. And you go, my God,
Mm,
I run the company. I know the material as good, if not
right.
better than anyone. And the moment you sit there and go, I know it, I'm just going to tell it my story in the way it goes. And you know
Yes.
what? If I miss a few of the bullet points I had, oh well, as long as I
Nobody
engage
knows.
you, nobody knows except for you. And if you
Yes.
follow the script, it never comes across, even if you wrote it yourself, like you.
Right.
But it's a
Yeah.
hard thing to learn because you always feel like I always, like salespeople, I go, the best salesperson is you can have a slide set. It's only supposed to be speaker support. But if you feel like you have to go from A to Z in that order, you're
Yeah.
never going to be successful. You got to be able to just know your information, tell your story. People want to engage with someone that they feel a connection with.
Yes. 100%. I think that's great advice that you're giving folks there.
Yeah.
Just the once you drop in and you're in the flow and in the conversation, you're present, and you've done enough prep, so it's in your back
Yep.
pocket, like Tom Hanks. You'll
Yep.
know what to dole out at what point.
Exactly. All right. So I know you. So you've written a bunch of books, and then when you wrote this book, and you've helped so many leaders get their own voice, right? And that's incredible. And
Thank
you've
you.
done it with our organization. You've spoken to. What have you learned in this process? Like, what is different? All right. So this is perfect. You wrote this in 2013. So
Yeah.
what's the Amy of 13 and the Amy of 21? What have you learned along the way that makes you different?
Wow, that's such a great question. Thanks, Ben. I think what you said earlier, it's a lifelong journey, right? I will forever, like everyone listening to us here today, be in search of that mastery of a next self-expression. The next manifestation of purpose or influence keeps changing and evolving. And my voice and what I try to share with the world is going to kind of keep riding with me in that way. So that's been a big learning, that rather than forcing or efforting it, there's been a natural unfolding that I also have to trust. So I think the Amy of today is probably a little less forcing, driving, and a little more
Right.
open and receptive. And I think the tail end, as you work on voice and as you become more skilled in different situations. So certainly we want to be as effective as we can be. But I find that a lot of my work now is working with people to say, you know what? Like, let's loosen the grip and like you can unapologetically be you.
Yep.
So now I find the work is shifting to I'm really searching for that kernel of truth inside of somebody. And what's been this thing that keeps unfolding and keeps showing up in different ways. Uh,
I I love how you've grown. I also think millennials who are now sort of taking over the world, they want to be spoken to that way. They
mm,
want more real, right? It's
yeah,
a they don't want to be sold. They want to be talked to. So I love your growth in it. All right,
thanks.
question: who are some of the most compelling, or one compelling speaker you've ever seen? Like truly own the room.
Wow. I last week someone just sent me a podcast with Melody Hobson. I think she's the chairwoman of Starbucks, and
Yep.
I was so awestruck by that podcast. She was with Adam Grant,
Hmm.
and there was this line she said, and I've been thinking about it all week, Ben. She said, and I hope I don't butcher this. So for
Okay.
everyone listening, go out and listen to that podcast yourself. But she said something that she'd gotten feedback once that she was kind but not soft, and that she was strong without being sort of unnecessarily tough, right? And that was, and I just thought, I remember thinking when I heard that, like, wow, that's kind of a signature voice moment where it is a dance we all ride, and she had found her own way. And I was really struck by and sort of found like I kind of want to follow this leader and listen to more of her going forward.
I
So
mean, if I had to be a leader, that's the leader I want to be. I mean, I
yeah.
want, kind,
Mm.
but yet he's going to make the decision. He's not going to have a problem making the decision. That's who
Right.
you want to follow up a mountain. I love that. All right,
Yeah.
live speaker that you've seen in a room, like anyone in particular?
Um, Gosh, her name, I was at a conference and there's this wonderful professor at Columbia. And for some reason right now her name, but I was like again starstruck kind of by the just the engagement of the room, the conversation, how this person owned the room for sure.
So for me, it's two. Um, about 20 years ago, I had the privilege of hearing Colin Powell speak at an event,
Oh wow. Mm.
and he just owned the room from the moment he got up there and told stories. You
Wow.
just were so captivated, and he was
Wow.
so calm, cool, and collected, and you stayed on every single word he said because you're just around someone who's just pretty amazing. And then
Wow.
recently, about a year and a half, right before COVID, I was at the Content Marketing Institute's conference. I was speaking there, and I had like an hour before I had to get on a plane. It was in Cleveland, and a bunch of my colleagues were going to go hear a keynote. And I don't normally go into the keynotes because you show up at a conference, you want to network, and you leave, and it's not just not my thing. And I heard a speaker named Ron Tite speak, and he wrote a book.
Mm.
I actually had a chance to interview him. First time in my entire life that I was in a room, heard someone give a 45, 50-minute keynote, and when it was over, I walked up to the stage. Never have done this in my entire life,
Mm.
and stuck on my hand and go, "This was like one of the best, keynotes I've
Oh,
ever heard."
wow.
If I just wanted to say that, I felt like a fanboy, but
Right.
I really did
Yeah.
because he moved me, and kept on saying, "I'm going to stay for 10 minutes. I'm going to head." And at the end, I was like, "I don't even care if I miss my flight. I got to
Wow.
tell him." And for me, it's not easy to stand up and go walk over to someone and go, "Hey,
Yeah.
I just want to tell you you're great." And it took up courage, but I'm so glad I did because
Yes.
he made a difference in who I am. Because you look at
Yeah.
him speak, you go, "I want to be a speaker like he is." So
Yeah. And again, I love what you're highlighting, Ben. This again, how did you leave the person feeling? Right. So often we talk about presence or communications like this tactical X's and
yeah,
O's, when in the end, the ones we remember are this like visceral experience where we were moved, we were touched,
yep.
we were left feeling a certain way. So I love that I hope is one of the takeaways from our conversation. I'm certainly taking that away as I hear you describe the people in your life.
It's funny. Every time I talk to you, I go, I got to talk to Amy more. But then the only way I ever get to talk to you is when I get you on the program to go over one of your amazing accomplishments. Like always, this was so much fun for me.
Me
I feel
too.
like every time I get to do one of these interviews, it's like I get to attend a master class and I learn something. And
Thank you.
I truly appreciate you giving us your time. I know the audience will love it. Everyone should go out and get the book, Own the Room. And all of her other books, it is amazing. Trust me.
Thank you.
And Amy, have an incredible day and have a great
You too.
Thanksgiving if I don't talk to you before.
You too, Ben. So great to be here. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.